Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
And welcome back, folks, to Through a Scottish Prism. Been a week since we last spoke. I hope you're all well and your family are all well. Everyone's keeping well. Nice to have you back. I've got today some great guests for you, as always. Two newbies and a revisit. And they're all from the council side of business. I've got Tony Buchanan from, I should immediately say, from Barhead Nielsen Uplandmoor branch, an old sparring partner of mine, who is the group leader for the SNP in the East Renfrewshire Council, as well as the council leader. So, hi, Tony. Lovely to see you. It's been a long time, my friend, since we last...
Hi, Roddy. It has been. Good to see you looking well.
Yeah, you too, sir. You too. I'm also joined by Julia McAnulty, who's the spokesperson for the ISP and local authority matters. Julia, lovely to see you back here again. You keeping
Hi
well?
there, Roddy. Yep, keeping very well, Roddy.
Excellent.
And it's good to see you again.
You too, always the same. And we're also joined by Lee Wilson of the Alba local government spokesman, Lee's a councillor up there in Aberdeenshire. Lee, welcome to Scottish Prism. Nice to have you here, all of you. As I said at the beginning, just as my wee quick intro, that you're all involved in the upcoming local authority elections. And I was just thinking about it, that if you like, the MPs and the MSPs are actually viewed as the SAS and the fighter pilots, and the poor old councillors are viewed as almost as the privates and the infantry. And yet it is the councillors, Tony, that make sure your bins are emptied and your potholes are filled in, and that the schools got heating and lighting and everything else. Do you ever feel you're a wee bit undervalued as councillors?
I think that's very true, Roddy. I think we're at the delivery end and the sharp end of every decision that gets made, if you like. So no matter whether it be a decision from Westminster or Holyrood, it's local government that tends to either bear the brunt of it or be responsible for the delivery of those measures. And so, yes, there is an element of it. And certainly from a local government point of view, we are very much pushing that it shouldn't be a them and us or different tiers of government, that it should be spheres of government, because we are all equally, if you like, as important in terms of the delivery and in terms of the outcomes that we want to see.
You know, and the theme of, not appreciated the way you should be. I've spoken to a few MPs from all parties, and they all say the same. When they go to their surgeries, it is things about their bins and the potholes and the schools and things like that fill their inbox, and it's sort of shuffled down to you guys. But the media throughout the UK, not just in Scotland, don't actually promote the council or the council elections the way they should, do they?
They don't, Roddy, and it's a really good point that turnout for local authority elections is painfully low, and it's incredibly disappointing because, as Tony said, the things that people really care about, the things that people go to their MP and MSP demanding action on, are things that more often than not fall under the jurisdiction of local authorities. Now, it's not a discussion for today. It's a body of work that I think all of us as elected members should go away and think about. But the attitude and the way that we view local government has got to change. The way that we fund local government, crucially, has got to change, because we've got to place a lot more importance and emphasis on local government and pushing power down to local communities.
Julia, we're all agreed that you don't get the profile you should in local authorities. What can we do to improve that situation?
I think maybe we have to present differently to people, maybe think outside the box a bit. I mean, I was trying to describe this to some of the people in our party who were interested in local government but didn't really know what it entailed. And I said to them, imagine if there was a company in your area and it had £1 billion budget, and it had it was the biggest employer in your area, and everyone in the area was a shareholder in that company and had a stake in it and a vote in it. and it handled everything that basically mattered to you, like your schools, your bins, and all the rest of it. Would you be interested in who was running that? I mean, and all of them said, yes, of course we would. And I said, well, why is it when you think of the council that you don't see it in those terms? We handle huge amounts of money. As Tony has already said, how effectively money gets distributed down from central government depends on how well councils do it. We take huge decisions about planning and things that affect planning and environment, local businesses, licensing, loads of stuff. So maybe, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's lost in presentation. And I think there's maybe a feeling about local councillors as well that, council is something you do when you can't be an MSP or something like that. Maybe it's to do with the status of the job as well, but it's got huge responsibilities. When I was a councillor, I was on finance and audit, and I mean, we were dealing with, millions, tens of millions of pounds every quarter. It's not a small role to be playing.
But it's very much, Tony, a political hotcake. I mean, this latest thing where the Tories are talking about not just bypassing Holyrood and going straight to the councils, that surely is not, let's set aside everyone's politics, but that for local government surely is not a good sign where they're playing politics at that level and sort of saying, well, I assume the money will come with conditions, with huge conditions, and probably won't go to any councils that you guys are in. But it is a danger to local democracy, is it not?
It's a very real danger to local democracy, particularly in Scotland. And that's for every authority, no matter what colour you are, if you like. So yeah, the levelling up fund process and the idea that, first of all, it's significantly flawed because it in no way matches either the ESIF or ERDF funding that we previously had. And it doesn't operate on a basis of having regional assistance maps in order to look at where the need is in terms of a lot of that finance. So there are significant flaws in it straight away. But the idea that you also have to go through your MP and that the colour of that MP in terms of the party they represent is relevant, then that's a huge issue because I think it will no doubt exclude many authorities. I know some have already been successful with the limited funds that have become available. But yes, I think it leaves itself open to question. But it's a particular concern that it's an attempt to bypass our government in Holyrood. Because that in turn, when there are projects which should be working together and trying to play one off the other in terms of providing capital funding is, I think, an extremely unfortunate way, shall I say, by being polite, to try and administer monies which would benefit communities.
Yeah, we've got to say, we know that, as we've seen with track and trace and HR2, the London government, Lee, money doesn't tend to always get straight to the point where it's needed. But again, the Scottish government, any government, doesn't matter what colour, as Tony put it, of government there is, they always put restrictions on the local authority, e.g., here's your money, here's your 100 quid, but you've got to spend 10 of it in this, 12 of it in that, 14 quid of it in that. Do you think that's something that has to be looked at and allow local authorities to actually do their own prioritising instead of carrying the policies of the government at Holyrood? Well, let's just keep it at Holyrood just now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think. Sorry, I didn't hear you saying Lee there. I just thought ring fencing is a problem. Yes, apologies, Lee. On you go.
I was going to agree with you, Tony, and say absolutely, it's a big issue, and Tony will recognise this as well. That increasingly, as pots of money are ring fenced, it means that the statutory services that we provide, the pressure on them becomes increasingly difficult every year. So we need to think about how we fund local authorities, and that's crucially important. What I would say is that I think there is some agreement among all of the parties, actually, that the council tax is for the bin, basically, that it's not suitable anymore. It doesn't fund local authorities adequately. So I think there's agreement that we need to end the council tax. that unfortunately is where the agreement ends. And there doesn't seem to be agreement on, okay, if we get rid of the council tax, what do we replace it with? The SNP a number of years ago had policy of a local income tax. I think there were a number of obstacles why that was perhaps unworkable at the time. Whether we found a situation that we can suitably implement for local authorities, I'm not sure. We need to have a serious think about this, because it's getting to the point now where it's becoming detrimentally unhealthy in terms of the funding we have in local authorities.
Julie, do you think that the present circumstances, we're hearing that inflation's running at what, 6% just now, without the increases in power and energy that's coming down the line, and Holyrood has let the brakes off and said, well, the councils can, you know, raise up to, is it 4% or 5% or something? I can't remember what it is.
Yeah.
Do we think that's the wisest time to be doing this when there's such a pressure on budgets in most homes?
Well, I mean, there's no easy answers to any of this. I mean, Lee and Tony will be aware that, you know, we've had the council tax freeze for several years. There was always an option that the council could raise the money rather than taking the money to the freeze. That they could raise the money through the council tax by raising the council tax. But essentially, the problem that we're all dealing with is that there's been a war of attrition on budgets to local authorities by Westminster, and it really is a kind of act of spite in a kind of way that's making us all scrabble around and trying to cut the cloth to fit, and basically the cloth we've been given is shrinking steadily smaller and smaller. Money's got to come from somewhere. I do have to say that we missed a sitter this week in terms of Scotland, because that was something that could have generated a lot of income for local authorities that didn't depend on Westminster to give it to us. And what one can only hope that when there's maybe more information about what promises have been written in, hopefully about the supply chain, that there's maybe going to be some benefit, especially to rural communities. But that there's a real problem trying to generate income, and if it doesn't come from central government, then it has to come from somewhere else. No easy answers to it. We have to look at how we tax and how we relate that to property and also to people's income as well, I think.
Yep. Tony, like the NHS, you will never have enough money. You know, you will always say, no, we need more money, Roddy, we need more money. But as Julie hit on, do we have to get innovative, or are we so restricted that you can't come up with local initiatives that would help you to raise more without just going directly to the raising of the council tax?
To be honest, Roddy, I think we've been innovative for significant time, almost the last 15 years in effect. I know that I first got elected back in 2007. And in 2008, we effectively had the crash in terms of the economy plummeting rapidly. And since then, year on year, we've effectively had a reduction in our budgets, as has the Scottish Government, because, you know, there has been an equal reduction from Westminster to Holyrood in that period of time. And therefore, I think all local authorities have been extremely innovative in terms of moving forward. We've, changed working practices. We've looked at the most efficient ways of delivering services. We've done all of that over the last, certainly 15 years now. I've been a councillor. And in that period of time, I feel that we have constantly been looking to make savings. Year on year, we've effectively had to make some savings, some clearly worse than others. So I think we have already moved. In terms of generating more money locally, it really depends. The variation in authorities, and it makes that very difficult to do anything that would be significant. We obviously in East Renfrewshire sit in an area very close to Glasgow, close to Paisley, close to the main work areas that people will go to. So most of our residents commute into neighbouring authorities to go to work. So to put charges on that, we're the biggest employer in the area. We have a lot of small, medium enterprises that do very well. But to impact the charges on there or even on things like parking would only be minimal in order to fill the gap. But bearing in mind, council tax for most authorities, indeed probably all 32 of the Scottish authorities, only makes up between 18 and 20% of our overall budget. So it would need to be something significantly more in order to grow that further. So there are difficulties. Some authorities, the bigger ones, Glasgow, Edinburgh, for example, may well look at tourism taxes and such like, where there can be a benefit from that. But for all of the others, it makes it very difficult.
Yeah, you don't get many tourists coming to Barrhead, let's be honest, Tony, do you?
Well, I don't know, but given how we're pushing ahead just now, it's actually improving, I suspect.
Yeah, the dams, but that's another story for another day. It's a, you know,
that
your holidays in Barrhead now, folks.
That will be a good tourist attraction when it's completed.
It will. You opened the door here, Lee, so I'm going to kind of put you in the spot about, you know, we have to find new ways of raising tax. I had Graham MacLeod of the SNP on here a few weeks ago, who has been promoting within the SNP a land tax. I've got to say, I was very impressed with what we started a land and roof tax as a new way of replacing council tax. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that or do you have a particular route you think would be a better way to go than council tax? And I've got to say, you started this, so that's why you get asked the question.
I think the land tax is an interesting option, and I certainly think it's worth looking at. The one thing I would say is that there are various different taxes you could look at. A local income tax I mentioned earlier, a land tax, a service tax. Clearly, every one of them will have winners and losers. So you'll have people argue the case for one and not for the other. That's fine. The situation we're in at the moment, though, because the council tax, as it is currently in place, is completely unsustainable, we do need to change. We need to change to something. In some ways, I kind of think what we change to is less important than making the change itself. We've got, in effect, we've got a majority government now. So I think by the end of the term, we need to have something in place because, as Tony will know, it is becoming completely unsustainable. And as a councillor, it can be incredibly dispiriting year on year, having to make more savings. And bluntly, there is no more fat left to cut. Councils, as Tony said, have all been incredibly innovative over the past number of years. They've tried to look at ways they can save money. They've tried to look at areas where they can increase charges, for example. And that's fine, but that can only go so far. And as Tony says, even the council tax itself is a drop in the ocean compared to what we need. So something has to happen, but it's got to be bold, it's got to be radical, and it's got to be adequate for funding local services.
Mm-hmm.
Julia, do you have a particular favourite? Have you something, you know, land tax, local income tax, something you think would be the magic bullet for us?
I think it has to be picked through very carefully, Roddy. I mean, as Lee says, there's pros and cons to everything. I mean, if you're going with, for example, council tax, which is kind of based on property, its advantage is that properties don't move. And that in terms of administration makes it a lot simpler. That was what went wrong, apart from other things with the poll tax when it was brought in, because it was based on people and people move around. And I remember at the time in Strathclyde Council, which was going at that point, there was 44,000 corrections to the register a month. So there can be real practical problems in terms of you know, simply income tax when it's not based on a property. But of course, you can get a lot of people living in a property, and they might be earning lots of money, and they're not paying very much. So it's trying, you know, maybe some kind of hybrid of that. That accurately reflects that there maybe needs to be a look at banding. And also, I mean, we need to look maybe at business rates as well, and what's happening with that. But the whole thing needs a huge overhaul. It's not fit for purpose any longer. And as Lee says, we're cutting the fat. I mean, I'm just thinking about my own council here, which tied up all its and I think Glasgow did this as well. I don't know if the others have done this. Tied up all its commercial properties as collateral against a £45 million loan from Barclays to pay for equal pay. So basically, the revenue stream from all those commercial properties that we get to the council is collateral against that loan, so we don't get the benefit of that, and that's the kind of things that've been going on. And I remember the meeting that we had about that, and we exploded when this was put in front of us. But what could we do? Where were we going to get 45 million from? I mean, you know, it's these kind of things you're dealing with all the time, and councils are trying to come up with all kinds of ways of, you know, innovating things, but there's only so far you can go.
Tony, you're explaining that there's some, I mean, you, for example, have had a very good relationship with the coalition with the Labour Party. Can you see the parties coming together and for not playing, you know, the political football with this and coming up with something as a joint through COSLA or whatever to see if we can get round this problem? It's because it's perennial, and it has to be, as Lee and yourself, it has to be addressed sooner or later.
It does require to be addressed, and I would like to hope that party politics could be put to the side for the benefit of everyone, if you like. Personally, I think, you know, coalition politics will, I would imagine, always be the case in East Renfrewshire, just by the simple number of councillors that we have and the nature and makeup of the council under proportional representation. So it will always be coalition politics. But for me, that's actually pretty normal. It's pretty normal across Europe, and indeed probably most democratic societies, for coalitions to be in place. The UK is probably the anomaly in that respect. And coalitions work because they take out, if you like, the extremism of just simply one way, and they bring together a lot of the things that potentially could work. And when you can do that, you can bring the majority of your residents with you and deliver top quality services in the most effective manner. So yeah, I think there is work to be done. We have been fortunate. We were the first ever, back in 2007, Labour SNP coalition. We continue that up until this year. We'll determine if that will continue beyond May. But so far, I think it has worked. We have seen the benefits of it in East Renfrewshire. And, you know, putting our main arguments to the side, which our main difference, which is effectively independence, all of the other issues we are able to come to agreement on and deliver for our residents.
The good thing, Tony's touching on coalition here, and it's a fact. But the great thing I'm looking at, there's some questions to all these independence parties, but this is the first time at the councils where, with single transferable vote, and I'll be doing a programme exclusive of that. I don't want to get into vote to you vote today on the voting method. I'll be doing that as a separate issue. But there's a chance now for independence voters now, because well, SNP, I will assume, would be contesting almost every seat throughout Scotland, but there'll be Alba and ISP candidates as well, and it's going to give independent supporters a chance to get in the mix and get some of these coalition politics going. And I, for one, I'm desperately hoping that all the independence parties come together, all three of them. It's a very good point.
I agree entirely. One of the issues we have here in Aberdeenshire is that there's currently a Lib Dem Conservative coalition. Now, unless the SNP can overtake, in terms of their own number of councillors, the total of Lib Dem and Conservative councillors put together, they'll struggle to go into administration. One of the key things I think we can do in this election, and as the Alba local government convener, I'll be emphasising this in the weeks and months to come, is that from our point of view as Alba, it's a good election to fight, because it's obviously, as you say, on the basis of the STB electoral system, so people have more than one vote.
You're about to vote at the council elections in Scotland, but might things be slightly different to what you expect? In this election, the voting system used is called single transferable vote. Here's the lowdown. Each council in Scotland is divided into smaller areas called wards. 3 or 4 councillors will be elected in the ward you live in. You may already know that you need to number the candidates on your ballot paper in order of your choice. But do you know how the votes are counted and how people get elected? To be elected under this voting system, a candidate must reach a set amount of votes, known as the quota. So what is the quota? The quota is calculated by dividing the total number of valid votes cast by the number of seats to be elected plus 1 seat. A 1 is then added to that result. For example, with 500 valid ballot papers and 4 seats to be filled, the quota would be 101. The votes are counted in stages. Stage 1, only first preferences are counted. Anyone who reaches the quota is elected. Stage 2, any votes received for a candidate above the quota are transferred to the next choice on each of those ballot papers. If no candidate has enough votes to reach the quota, the candidate with the lowest number of votes is eliminated. Stage 3. All of their votes are passed to the next preference on those ballot papers. This process is repeated until all seats up for election have been filled and your councillors have been elected. Got it? Great work.
So I think what we should be saying as a party is, yes, for us, vote Alba number 1, but vote pro-independence with your other choices. And I would hope, in the spirit of collegiality, I would hope that other pro-independence parties would come together and say the same thing as well.
And are you a similar mind, Julia?
Yeah, well, I would always hope that whatever way people transfer their vote, it would go to a pro-independence party. I mean, we have all, I think, identified the key issue that's facing us in terms of funding is that we are still under the yoke of Westminster. So the sooner we can get away from that, the better. Yeah. And if there's votes going up again, then we should take them.
Yeah. Tori, going into this, what would you say? We're coming towards the end of our time together. It always does fly when you're having fun. What do you think is the most important thing in this upcoming election, either party or just in general?
No, I think continuing to deliver good services is going to be extremely difficult in the current budget setting. I'm hoping that from an SNP point of view, obviously, that we continue to increase our number in East Renfrewshire, sure, and that we can continue to be in the administration, because I think we've done a fantastic job. Our education is one of the key aspects, as you know, in the area, and we continue to be the top performing authority for that. And I know that our residents cherish the education. Social care is going to be another big issue. And we were also one of the areas that were, back in 2014, when we first moved to an IGB, it's the Integrated Joint Boards for Health and Social Care, we'd already moved significantly, and it just effectively was a name change for us. So we've delivered a lot of good quality healthcare services, which are all encompassing and all inclusive, whether you be elderly or younger, still at school or indeed preschool. So all of our services are included within that, and we need to continue to improve on those services. I don't think nothing can stand still, and by doing so, I think we therefore get the support of our residents, and in doing so, we show good governance. And I think at the end of the day, showing that good governance is what will benefit us and move us toward independence.
Lee, what are you hoping for in this, in this election?
Well, in terms of the Alba Party, we've outlined our 3 themes. We think that pro-independence parties should be working together. So all of the Alba councillors elected will commit to working in that cross-party independence convention. We've spoken about the second key theme, the child poverty action plan that we have. Clearly, we're going through something of a winter of discontent right now with inflation, gas prices rising. So clearly, people are feeling the pinch. There's a lot of people in economic insecurity, and bluntly, a council tax increase will hit them the hardest. Completely take on board the points that we've all kind of teased out today, that a council tax freeze is very difficult for councils to implement if it's done unilaterally, because it means that the councils then have to come up with savings. But I think, given the severity of the situation, it's something the Scottish Government should be looking at doing, because we can really ill afford to be putting people into deeper economic insecurity at the moment. And clearly, the other key theme is women's rights. There's a lot of heat generated on social media on this topic. My own opinion is that we need to take the heat out of this debate, take it out of the gutter of social media in many ways, and put it to a citizens' assembly, because I'm very attuned to the fact that tone and the tone of this debate is incredibly important. We need to get the tone right that respects women's hard-won rights that they've won over many years, and obviously the transgender community as well. So we need to bring people together, put it to a citizens' assembly, and come on, let's come to some kind of compromise that we can all live with. So women's rights and protecting women's rights will be a key theme for us as well.
And Julie, what about for the ISP? What's your main theme for this coming election?
Yeah, well, we're looking at several things, Roddy, so it's not sorted out yet. But some of the things we're looking at, I mean, picking up on Lee's thing of women's rights, I personally would like to see the equal pay claims finally paid out next next council term. This has been something that's been dragging on for years and years and years. The settlements were finally made, but a lot of the money's still not been paid out, and I would like to see that honoured, and honour women's rights in a very practical fashion, as it were. Touching on what Tony said about health and social care, obviously this is actually quite a good point, because we had but I'm interested you've got an integrated joint board, Tony, because a lot of them went for the body corporate and that, which I wasn't very keen on. But this is probably a very good time, in view of the pandemic and so on, to see how all of these things are working respectively, see if they can be tightened up. I would like an integrated joint board in this in my own council, if we could manage it. And we did have problems with leakage in terms of money, because we ended up with a 10 million deficit at the very start. So that needs to be looked at as a matter of urgency. People are coming out of the pandemic, and there's lots of issues around employment just now, and what you would call the new poor, who are suddenly finding themselves without a job and not knowing where to turn. And I would also like to see councils funding properly things like Citizens Advice Bureau and so on, who actually give an awful lot of bang for buck. And it's also a way of getting money from central government without having to rely on local authority funding. If you've got a good organisation like that that can basically make sure that everyone's claiming what they're entitled to. And supporting people, especially in terms of evictions, which is a huge issue at the moment, especially for local councils, and which actually costs local councils thousands of pounds for each eviction that goes to, it's to full term, as it were. So those are the kind of areas we're looking at the moment. And of course, it goes without saying that we will not be supporting any questionnaires to school pupils about their proclivities and stuff like that. But anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole at the moment. So that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, it's all been nice and happy just now. Let's keep it that way. I want to thank you. I want to thank the three of you for turning up today. And it just goes to prove, contrary to what some people would say again on social media, that the independence parties can debate together sensibly. They can. There is so much common ground. There is more that unites us than will ever divide us. And I hope my hope for this election is that comes to fruition, and we all realise that we are all in the same team, just different divisions. I look at like the old Labour Party, where you had the left wing and the right wing and the centre. That's how I view our independence parties. But thank you, and can I wish each and every single one of you particular luck in this upcoming election. And fear of getting my knuckles wrapped later, but I hope the lads that I all know and love very much, and Barhead, Neilson, Up the Moor and the East End do especially well, Tony. And please send on my regards to them. Tell them I was asking for them all, and I hope they do very, very well. Thank you very, very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roddy. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
So to join me today, folks, to discuss I've just interviewed the guys there, and also the weekly events. I'm joined by David Henry of the SSRG group, and also a standing councillor for the Alba Party in May. David, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Nice to see you again, my friend. How are you?
It's good. It's good. It's a bit chilly here. I bet it's warmer where you are.
Well, yes, Dubai is quite nice. Yes, as I say, I'm a wee bit jet lagged. If I suddenly, you'll know what it is. But yeah, it's a very nice, pleasant day here today. I was straight off the plane away to a rugby tournament, but by the by. But anyway, the chat with the guys was very interesting, and it was really good, David, to see that the ISP, Alba, and the SNP, contrary to some of the things we see in social media, can actually sit and debate and chat without any animosity and in, agreeing on so many things. It was really, really refreshing.
Yeah, well, it's obvious to me that the penny's dropping. I think many of our friends in the SNP, they may have thought or wished that Alba was just going to be a flash in the pan, and maybe it's beginning to sink in that it's not. It's here to stay, and I think we bring a positive, if you like, focus not only to independence and it's the need for it urgently, but also new, fresh ideas into council elections. And it's great. Absolutely, I welcome ISP and SNP candidates. Let's get our heads round tables and come up with solutions that help everybody. That's, of course, the way forward. So I think it's a great positive thing.
Yeah, because this is the first time ever that we're going to have 3 independence parties and with single transferable vote, which, as I alluded to in the earlier part of the programme, I'm not going to go into today. That's a programme all on its own on the single transferable vote. But this gives people who support independence more votes to use before they vote. Basically, 3 parties opposed to 1.
Absolutely, and let's face it, the unionist parties have used these systems to keep them in a position of influence, even though they don't actually have that much support. So clearly, we've got to be clever and we've got to get our positive message across. But we're getting a great feedback out on the street. I've just come away from our street stall here in Edinburgh into the quiet and relative warmth of a car. But it's a really positive message that we've got, and it's great, and we're engaging people. I think the biggest thing is to get the message across.
But the people, I mean, that's as I was saying to the guys earlier, the local councillors and the local council elections do not get the attention that they deserve, because that's the thing, that your potholes, your bins, the things, the grass getting cut, etc., all these things, and it's just looked down upon. We really need to, I think it's sometimes a pity that there actually is party politics in local authorities. It would be better if there wasn't sometimes, I believe, and we could get more consensus. But that's another advantage of having 3 independence parties. We're likely to get more consensus and less, Willie Bain type politics.
Listen, I think the problem for many, and I've been involved obviously with the SNP's campaigns for the last 7 or 8 years, and one of the issues even for the council is I don't think many people understand exactly what local councils deliver. At the end of the day, they're the ones running the schools. They're the ones running your local transport, housing, local housing, social housing. It's the local council that's in charge of that. So these are the issues. Now, of course, they get their money from different sources, including the council tax, but that's only part of their revenue. So I think you alluded earlier about central government grants coming from Westminster to the Scottish Parliament and then down to the councils. And that's certainly true. That's how it's funded. But people don't understand it's not all just about collecting your bins and dog mess on the street. It's a lot more than that. And therefore, we need to start focusing on how we can positively improve our services.
I know this is a thing that's close to your heart, and I'm going to light the blue touch paper and stand right back. But part of that conversation that we had, Julie touched on it, which was the sell-off this week. If we had been smarter or wiser, could have been used to help fund local government and to make up that shortfall. Because in fairness to the SNP Scottish Government, as you've alluded to, their money gets cut. They've got to cut somewhere, and the councils are an easy target to cut. And so this was an opportunity to use this, shall we say, a bit more wisely, and it could have been help local funding.
I think this week's news about the wind farm generation contracts being sold off for a pittance is what that shows is that there isn't expertise in the current SNP Green administration. They're out of their depth, I think, on things like this. They're thinking short term and saying, oh, well, we've gained a fixed amount of money. Yeah, but you've given away our future revenues, and it'll turn out to be seen as a very bad deal. But why wasn't this being discussed? Why wasn't it party policy? You know, that's just something that should have been being discussed, I think, in the SNP at conference years ago. There should have been a policy of, you know, not for it to appear out of nowhere. I wanted to bring one fact up, which I think people need to understand. Scotland last year generated 97.5% of its electricity needs from renewables. That's wind and solar. And yet, I'm very well aware that people's electricity bills are about to double. 100% increase is what a lot of people are going to be hit with. That is happening because we're in a union with England. And the national grid, which is where our renewable energy is distributed to, is actually feeding homes south of the border. South of the border, their generation is mostly from gas-powered power stations. It is gas that has rocketed in price on the wholesale market. But we're now being hit with the extra high electricity costs because we're linked to a national grid and we're paying the price of that national grid south of the border. And Scotland should have been planning, and we should have been planning, and we still can. And I think this is the lesson from what this week. This just is another example of why we must, with urgency, become an independent country and take control of our future, including our energy, etc. We don't have to be living like this. We don't have to have cuts coming from Westminster and being passed down the chain. We could reverse that if only we take, and we're courage, and we take that decision. So I would urge people to, for the next council election, think very carefully who they want to be elected in their local area. Is that person going to work with others to better everybody's quality of life, which I'm certainly prepared to do.
Yes. Well, that's what we need. We need cooperation. Lee, of course, touched on the fact that the Alba are very much defending women's rights, and he would like to see a citizens' assembly. I wrote today myself about this, that it needs to be debated and discussed. It's a dividing matter in the Yes movement, is women's rights and the Section 30. And these things have never, as you've highlighted, it's the same with the set-off, have never been debated at the SNP conference, nor with their NEC, nor with the general public. These things just appeared. All three of those things just came from nowhere almost. They need to be fleshed out, David. There needs to be discussion, and it needs to involve more than one party, and all parties, and the SSRG, and possibly now Scotland, the trade unions, whoever. We have to come together and come up with a plan, because we can't go on with this. This next 12 months is going to be horrific for an awful lot of our fellow Scottish citizens.
Yeah, I think also this week we've seen the public finally wake up across the UK to what is a disastrous Boris Johnson. But I'm surprised to see, if you like, people like Ian Blackford MP making hay out of saying that he should resign. I would have thought he's the best advert that the Yes movement could possibly have of why we should be no longer part of this union. You know, he's spent a whole career misleading people and saying whatever he liked to get elected, to get into power. That is what he always seems to have wanted. So we want serious politicians at local level, at regional level, and then finally ready for the next general election, so that we can end this union that is not fair, doesn't work in our favour. There's a reason that 60 odd other countries left English rule, because it didn't work for them, and not one of them has come back begging to be ruled from London again. It goes without saying. We are on our road, I think, now. It can't be much longer, where we get a clear majority and people wake up and realise it can't possibly be as bad as what's coming. I don't know if you've seen the footage online. There are, I think it's 9 kilometres of trucks waiting to get into
Kent.
Dover. Now, and then people are saying, oh, people didn't know that this was going to happen. Well, I did. I've taken things through customs. I know going to Switzerland from London, you've got to have customs paperwork, a customs agent, and all the delays, and then you've got to fill out all these forms. It's incredibly time consuming. That was just to take stuff to what was a Geneva Motor Show, which is outside the EU. Now you've got to do all of that just to take it to France and do the same coming the other way. So now I predict in a week's time, there's already massive empty shelves. I've seen them, that there's going to be even more, because those trucks that are waiting, queuing to get out of the UK and go into Europe, they're meant to be coming back probably within 2 days. Well, they're not going to come back in 2 days, are they? Because they're still stuck here.
Take them 6 days to get out.
And therefore it's going to do the same coming back. So guess what? A week's time, I predict there's even more shortages coming. And this is what we've let ourselves in for, because we're letting Boris run the show with his crackpot Brexiteers. Scotland must wake up and take responsibility. And that starts at the council elections. I would urge everyone watching to think long and hard. Who do they think is going to help them locally, but also supports independence, and support that candidate? And think about who they're going to put number 2 and who they're going to put number 3, because that's how the voting system works. So be smart and vote for people that represent you.
Yeah, I would say to you not to get too worried if they replace Boris, because they'll just replace him with another narcissistic sociopath anyway, who will also be a recruiter for the movement. But like you, I'm most concerned that so many of the SNP MPs are trying to save Brexit Britain and the Westminster Parliament instead of using it as a leverage to get ourselves out of the union. And that's what has to be. Stop trying to save Westminster from itself. Let's get, saving Scotland.
I think what we're seeing is what happens when the party that's been in power for a long time is basically absorbed into the process and the systems and gets used to that and gets used to working within those processes, i.e. within Westminster. But and I think that's what's happened to a very big degree. We don't want to be there. I've visited. I mean, I don't know how many people watching this have actually visited the House of Commons. I visited it and thought, my God, it's like a museum. It was like visiting a museum. I thought it's so out of date and crumbling and clearly designed for a different century. And of course, their processes are totally archaic as well. Down to they're not allowed to make electronic voting, and so everyone. I mean, that's part of. We criticise these politicians, right, including our own ones, for expenses, but in fact they are required to go down to London in case within 20 minutes there's a vote called. This is the rules. So they've got to be down there within 20 minutes of the main chamber from Monday to Thursday night. And then they all come home on the Friday. And then the whole thing starts again the next Monday. So this is what politicians have to do. So they've got all this traveling to do because they're not allowed to sit at home doing their work in their constituency office, which they clearly could. Technology's there, we could clearly log in remotely and vote. So we're part of this crazy process. Scotland can be so much better. We shouldn't be trying to get better at working within their processes. We should be creating our own, planning and progressing and getting ourselves ready for a new country. I mean, what sort of country do we want? Do we want to be just a replica of what we've already got? No, I don't think we do. I think the whole point of independence is we want to change the taxation system so that it's much fairer, so we don't have tax avoidance, we don't have offshore tax havens, all these things. Maybe pay a bit more in tax, but get better benefits, higher pension. All this is totally possible. I mean, we could be much more like a Scandinavian country, which is, I think, where Scotland's future lies. And that energy deal, the energy deal is a bad deal. And it just shows you that that whoever was part of the Scottish government's negotiating team doesn't have a clue how to do such a deal. Why are we giving it away to private companies? Why is there not a Scottish-owned, publicly owned energy company, as promised, by the way, in 2017? I was there. I was in the audience. I listened to it. I got up and clapped, thought it was a great idea. As I left the hall, Channel 4 were outside, right? Can't remember who was doing the interviews, but Channel 4 were outside waiting for us all coming out. So we're coming out, going to go and find my car. And I got stopped and asked, what did I think about the speech, etc. And I thought it was very inspiring, and I really liked, and I told them I very much liked the idea of a publicly owned energy company. And I said, it should be called SNP, Scottish National Power. And they all, oh, that's good, right? And that went out live on their TV programme, Channel 4 News. And then they never did it. They didn't launch it. I hear they wasted £500,000 considering launching a Scottish
and we don't know why
company.
they didn't. We haven't been told a credible reason why they didn't do it.
I suspect it's because all they were really proposing to do was offer a billing company, i.e. a company that buys wholesale, sells to their customers and bills them, you know? And there's some merit in that. But the problem with those sort of businesses is they're just middlemen. So if what we were going to have was a Scottish National Power as a middleman buying in the marketplace, a bit like Utilita and OVO and all these other companies that have come out of nowhere, they don't generate any electricity, some of these. They don't actually make any energy. They just buy it wholesale, sell it retail, and bill the customer. That's all they're about. That's not an energy company. Scotland needs a joined up energy strategy. Yes, you need the billing company that does it for not for profit, that's owned by the public. So it's. I totally agree that that's what's needed. But you also need to be able to generate the power. And that's what's so criminal about what the failure that's just been exposed. There's no joined up thinking, no strategy. So yes, you need the Scottish company to bill the electricity, but you also need to be owning the wind turbines that are generating your renewable energy that hasn't gone up in price. So right now, that all demonstrates why we should be an independent country building our own infrastructure for the better of the people of Scotland. And I just don't understand how anybody thought that's a good deal and to try and make good out of it, saying it's going to create some jobs. It will, without doubt, create a few jobs, but they won't be the big jobs. They won't be the well-paid jobs. Where we should be manufacturing from our own steelworks, manufacturing the turbines. We should be, not only installing them and operating them, but we should also own them.
Build them. Own them and build them. But the other thing is, it's bad enough with the SNP, but the Green Party, you would think, they've been working in this for decades, you would think they would know, but they seem to be as clueless. They're off on another tangent as well. It's really quite scary and frightening. David, we're coming towards the end, old chap, and I want to thank you for being here and giving us your wisdom. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
I'm not sure there's much wisdom involved.
I'm being flattering. I'm hoping you'll send me a check in return for being nice.
Yeah.
Because I should share this. David puts me up sometimes when I'm in Scotland when we're going to conferences and things. So I've got to be nice to him. He's my landlord.
Still cleaning up the mess from the last visit.
Correct. Yeah. Yes, and I have to say there was plenty of gin and a nice dinner was made.
There's still lots of gin.
Oh, that's what we like to hear. So I wish you well. As I say, you're standing in May. I wish you every success. I know you're already working your socks off, and I'm sure you'll continue to do so. But until I speak to you again officially, thank you for being here, and to all my viewers as well. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have talking to these wonderful people. And you should really start giving the local council people a bit more respect and support them more. But until I see you all again, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by